Hello, and welcome to the Indy Author Podcast. Today, my guest is Orna Ross. Hey, Orna, how are you doing?
Hello, Matty. I'm doing extremely well. How are you?
I'm doing great, thank you. Just to give our listeners and viewers a little bit of background on you, Orna Ross is a novelist, poet, and the founder of the Alliance of Independent Authors, also known as Ally. And she was also my guest for one of the foundational sets of episodes of the podcast, which were the 7 processes of publishing. And those are conveniently episodes 101 through 107. And we're going to be talking today about what I think is a perfect follow on to that set of episodes. And so today we're going to be talking about creative planning for authors and poets. And I think this is a great time of year where this will be going out in November 2023. And I think it's kind of perfect timing because I know a lot of people like to regroup at the end of the year, plan for the following year, and we'll be able to give them some good tips on that. And so the way I wanted to approach this is that I was poking around on the Ally website, selfpublishingadvice.org, and I found a description of Orna's sort of philosophy about holistic planning. So we're going to be diving into that. But before we do that, Orna, I always like to ask people, what did you see either in your own writing life or your colleagues or your clients that made you think, oh, you know what? We really need a more holistic approach to planning.
What I saw, not to put it too dramatically, I do love to be dramatic every now and again, was a lot of suffering, to be perfectly honest. I saw people doing amazing things, and I saw, and it's in my role, in Ally, and also in my role as a writer. So I'm a writer who became a self-publisher and saw the difference that was, and in a sense, the need to move from being somebody who thinks about producing words, somebody who thinks about producing books and finding readers for them and bringing readers to them. And so when I became a self-publisher myself, up to that, the only planning system I ever had was a to-do list. I never needed any more than that. I knew what I needed to do and I would tick it off as I did it and have an occasional flurry, and that was all fine. When I came to becoming a self-publisher, not long after that, I also founded Ally. So not only was I now a writer, I was also a publisher, and I was also running a nonprofit for other author publishers. And so it was, as Prince Harry said, a lot. So I found that my to-do list was not equal to the task. And I was constantly feeling I was having a great time. So suffering is kind of, it might sound very dramatic. But at the same time, there was this constant feeling of being harried and harassed. I was running after myself, never quite feeling like I had done anything, despite the fact that I had done all of the things. There was always this mountainous to do ahead of me, and the to do list never got shorter. It was always getting longer. It took something else, the next thing came on. And that was disheartening in some kind of important way. And then other things I was seeing then in the community was a lot of people who were feeling, even though they had achieved wonderful things, not feeling any pride in that, or not feeling always conscious of what hadn't been done, looking at other people, comparisonitis, all these things that we're all very familiar with, terms in the community. And some people then becoming dangerously burnt out, really just not doing well, and finding that they wound up in a place where they just could not write because it had all kind of fallen apart. And so between my own experiences and there, I started to, as I realized the to-do list wasn't enough, I started to do planning programs. I think I purchased every kind of program going, but they were very mechanistic and very much kind of like you were a machine, tick, tick, fill that box, do that thing. They didn't allow for the messiness of the creative process, where today you say you're going to do something and actually you wind up doing something else, but actually that other thing eventually turns out to be better than the thing you thought you were going to do. That kind of thing that happens. And all the vagaries of being a creative. And so I think, really importantly, rest and play, creative rest and creative play. No sign of anything like that. It was all work, 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 produce, produce, produce. Or else they were just fancy calendars. They weren't planning systems. They didn't have an outcome in mind. And what I needed was something that actually created a system that what you want at the end, and then you kind of work back from there, and you are provide your system holds up the things you need in order to create. And sometimes, yes, that's work. Sometimes it is play, and sometimes it's rest. And so that's where the holistic bit came in. And the other aspect of the holistic bit was time and money. I think of time as having three kinds of dimensions. There's our clock time, which is what planners work on in terms of calendar time, the chunks of actual 90 minutes or a month or a quarter or whatever. But there's also creative time, which is when you are in the zone and time just loses all meaning and you are connected with what you're doing. We all know as creatives that when we're in there, time becomes quite irrelevant, and productivity and everything just comes together in a really great way. And so that's that whole concept of how you get into creative flow and how your practices and your processes and your planning actually come together in order for you to be in that flow state as often as you possibly can be. And so that's what I wanted for myself. And so I started to try and put that together for myself, and which I did. And things really improved as I did that. And then I started to share it with other people, because people would often say to me, how do you do everything you do? That's the question, probably the question I get asked most often, actually. How do you do all the different things? And I always say creative planning. And they say, what do you mean? And then I tell them what I was doing. And they say, oh, I want to have a go at that. So it went from that to handing it on organically. And then after a couple of years, I decided, yeah, if I'm going to formalize this, because I really do think at first I just thought of it as something that's just my kooky way of doing things. But then I thought, there is something actually in this, because I did see it kind of working. So I started a small Patreon group, and we've been working together for some years now. And now I'm kind of taking it out, if you like, with a Kickstarter in November, which will, take it out into the wider world.
There are a couple of things that what you were saying made me think of. One is that idea that task management falls short of planning because there's usually not much prioritization. You know, it results in busyness, but not productivity necessarily. And the other thing that I really liked is the idea of a separate kind of time when you're in the creative zone. And I find that for myself, and it's both a good thing. If I start, I get through my task list and I start working on my writing. And then sometimes, 8 hours go by and then I suddenly realize it's time for dinner. But then I look back at those 8 hours and I think, could I have achieved what I did creatively in less time and left time for different kind of creative work or other kinds of work? So I think, these are all things we'll be able to get into as we talk through the 5 points that are the characteristics that you lay out for holistic planning. So I am just going to dive into the first one and ask you to sort of expand on it. And the first one is that planning should be a holistic effort that emphasizes the links between your values as an author and the value you offer your readers.
Yeah, so this seems to be very important. So a lot of authors come into this space and they hear other authors who have done well talking about what they did and how they did it. And I think that's completely the wrong place to start. And many authors spend years chasing around, listening to every piece of advice they get, trying out something that was never ever going to work for them because they weren't the same kind of writer or they weren't the same kind of publisher. Because, we have different styles of, depending on our genre and our writing style and everything. There are certain things that will never work for you as the author you are. There are certain things that will never work for you as the publisher you are, and you trying to do them and then feeling a sense of failure because you didn't succeed at them when you never should have tried it in the first place. So I think you've got to start with you. You've got to start with your own values. And so the workbook in the planning program begins there. It begins with your passion, what you love to do, and what aspects we dig deeply into, what aspects of writing you love, and also what kind of publisher you are. Are you a volume publisher, an engagement publisher, or a craft publisher? And then as a writer, are you somebody who's looking to entertain or to inform or to inspire? And other levels, both of those things. And your sense of purpose as a writer. So some authors know this straight away. They know exactly where their mission and their passion come together into a sense of purpose. Others say, I don't have a purpose. I just want to write because I like writing. But actually, there always is. There always is if you dig down a little bit deeper. And the more you can find out about your personal values and what's important to you, and then connect and see those values up and running in your writing. And then see, oh, they're up and running in how I approach my publishing as well. And if you bring that together into an integrated kind of system, now you know what your values are and you know what you're offering. You know what you know what the gift looks like. And then in there is embedded so much of what you can then offer as value to your reader. And then you attract the kinds of readers who like the same kind of stuff that you like, who have the same sort of values that you have, who like the language that you use, who like the way you talk about things, the way you feel things, the way you express things. It's all embedded in your book descriptions and in your imagery. Everything becomes easier when you know all that stuff. And you never know it completely, and everything is always in a state of flux. This is one of the things that makes our work challenging, is that it never just sits there. It's never just, one day is always kind of getting away from us. It's always changing. The world's changing, the readers are changing, that how publishing happens is changing. Everything is in a state of flux. That's the nature of life, actually, and not just publishing, but it's always in a state of flux. But the more you can kind of get to an understanding of yourself as author and as publisher, and the values that you have, and then the value that you're offering the reader, everything really becomes quite lovely. It's a very enjoyable sort of experience. And when you realize that's what you're doing, because we don't want to be writers in the main, we don't want to be writers to make money or to say, of course, we want to make a living from our writing. And of course, we want to be paid properly. And anyone who knows me knows how passionately I believe that creatives deserve a living as much as anybody else. Of course, that's really important. But there's something else going on there too. If you've decided you want to be a writer, and finding out your why and what's driving you is immensely enriching. So this planning program starts there.
And when someone is coming up with their why, is it a statement like, a company might have a mission statement? And if it is, can you share an example of the sort of idea a writer should have about what their mission is, what their why is?
Yeah, so it might be different, for different genres. So I'll just take myself as the example. But when it comes to my poetry, books, for example, what I'm actually trying to do is cultivate the creative state in the person who's reading the work. So to not just to talk about inspiration, but to make them feel inspired, if you like. When I'm writing nonfiction ally books, the why, I'm very much driven by the empowerment, the self-empowerment that I get from creative writing, the enjoyment of the creative freedom and creative control that gives me. It's very much about empowering other authors to experience that and to have that. So there, that's just kind of two examples. When it comes to my fiction, it's about bringing alive times and places that still have resonance, that have caused us to have, certain experiences in our time that, have historical tales on them. I want to tell those stories so that we understand the connection between past and the present. And so they're just some examples, but it's very unique. And there may be more than one aspect to it. So each person delves into it. You brought through a process. There are boxes to fill and lines to write. And then at the end of it, you kind of know what's going on more than you did. And you revisit it periodically as you go through.
You had said early on that you saw writers who would hear about an approach that worked for someone else and try it, even though another person might be able to tell them that it was not going to be a good match. Are there red flags that people should watch out for, or I guess green lights they should watch out for, that would indicate to them before they really dive into an approach whether it is more or less suitable for them?
Yes, I think so. If you are the kind of person who loathes social media, you're probably not going to be an engagement publisher, or vice versa. If you are that kind of person, maybe volume publishing is what you should do. If you're somebody that loves, getting in there and the texture of the words or the texture of the page or the texture, the look of the cover, the crafty kind of stuff, then, don't try to be a volume publisher, because sell direct, set up a whole different sort of thing around you. But if you want to write a lot of books, and the stories keep coming and they're in one genre and that genre is really popular and it's got loads of whale readers, then you are a volume publisher. The problem is volume publishing has been the dominant story in indie because that's what happens on Amazon, and Amazon is the dominant story on indie. And that big blanket over the indie publishing sector, author publishing sector, is stifling a lot of other ways of making a living and other ways of making income and other ways of approaching publishing. Now, I think that's beginning to shift as the community becomes more mature and as authors are developing the confidence to believe in themselves and start with themselves and their own values and so on, the very sorts of things we've been talking about already. We're seeing that more. And as the tools of these things so often go hand in hand, as the tools and technology which allow these things to happen are improving, and also as readers get used to the idea of buying direct and buying from an author rather than buying from Amazon, there is a shift that's happening. And we saw that with our Indie Author income survey earlier this year. We saw that there's a small but growing and significant sector of people who are doing things differently, who are making a living or better. Some of them are doing extraordinarily well with, say, direct sales or crowdfunding or different models from the Amazon model.
Yeah, I think that differentiation between, you said volume, engagement, and what was the third type?
And craft.
Cry. Yeah, I think that I saw that early on. I would put myself in the craft category, but early on in my author career, I found myself in a lot of virtual communities that were volume and was alarmed by the expectation it set. And I like that idea of needing to match the community you're tapping into for advice to the goals that you have.
I think that's very important. And sometimes it can be hard to find that, because you don't know what you're looking for. And I
Yeah.
think that's also what the planning process helps you to see. It can be
Hmm.
very difficult to see yourself, especially on your first few books, to actually see yourself as a writer. You're following something blindly. And, we're all pantsers in our publishing life at first, because it's very hard for anybody to plot it out fully. It's the kind of thing you have to learn by doing. And so seeing yourself, see a lot of what the planning process does is try to help you to see more clearly what's actually going on for you and to read the signs, as you put it.
Yeah, I think not a definitive marker, but an important marker is if you're reading advice or participating in group, are you feeling energized or are you feeling alarmed? And if you're feeling alarmed, you probably need to look for a different community or a different source for that.
I'm really glad you mentioned feelings because we don't talk about them enough, and one of the things one of the measures, there are four kind of measures that the planning system uses, and one of them is actually creative CHQ, your creative happiness quotient. It's basically the pleasure you're taking in what you're doing. And as you say, if you're not feeling good, that's a sign. That's not something you need to get over. So you
Yeah.
can drive yourself and push yourself to be something you think you have to be. That's actually a sign to you that possibly you're going in the wrong direction. Probably. I mean, there is such thing as creative discomfort, which we do need to get over because whenever we're putting ourselves out there, we're going to have that icky, scary kind of feeling. That's a different thing. Point being that you need the tools that allow you to do that kind of self-examination so you understand what your feeling is telling you. So you're listening to yourself. And in fact, listening to yourself means listening to lots of different people. You're not just one person. As an indie author, you're wearing three hats for starters. You're a maker, you're a manager, and you're a marketeer. But then there's also all the stuff that comes up when you're writing and digging around there in your psyche and bringing out these words. And then there's also the putting yourself out there through marketing and publishing and all the stuff that brings up. So you're going to have different parts of you that are maybe one part of you is energized and a different part of you is alarmed, and you need to get them talking to each other. So that's another thing that happens in the work is what I call the finding flow process, where you don't stifle parts of yourself that that are trying to tell you something. You actually get them engaged with each other. So the whole program is about integration. Integrating your writing with your publishing. It's about integrating the commercial with creative. It's about integrating different parts of yourself, integrating. the right kind of publishing, the right kind of writing, and understanding what's going on there.
Yeah, the image that, sprang to my mind as you were saying that is, like, deciding to dive off the high diving board, and that's going to be a scary experience, but for a lot of people, it would be an exhilarating experience. If you think about, like, getting past the creative discomfort, that could be an analogy, as opposed to, like, climbing the rock wall would just be I'm obviously using perfect personal examples because I remember that feeling of excitement and exhilaration, but still some fear when I was young and went off the high dive the first time. But like climbing a rock wall, I would have a completely different response to. That would be my just dread and discomfort response. And so there's some negatives in either one. The negatives are taking very different forms. One is sort of excitement, and the other one is just discomfort. And I think there are analogies to that as you're trying to find your path among the many that you're describing.
Perfect. And then the thing is that for somebody else, the rock wall might be the exhilarating factors, and the high dive might be pure torture. So
Exactly.
it's totally about nobody know you're the expert in your own life. You're the expert in your own publishing business, and you're the expert in your own writing. And so really, I think this is one of the reasons why so many indie authors fall away, defeated, discouraged, is a lack of that sort of self engagement in the process, and the realization that writing is a creative process, but so is publishing. But it's a different one. It's completely different, and it's going to call for completely different sets of skills and ways of doing things. But it is a creative process, and so you engage with it in the same way, just as you wouldn't expect to sit down at the desk and be a perfect writer the first day you sat down. Yet it's just amazing how many people expect to get the publishing right first time, and if they don't get it right first time, then I'm not selling. It's
Yeah.
over. Self
Yeah.
publishing didn't work for me. I
Yeah.
didn't sell my first book, and that kind of approach is still extraordinarily common.
Yeah. So I wanted to dive into the second of the characteristics of a holistic planning effort that you outlined, which is draw deeply on your creative passion and mission as an author and a publisher. And I think that some of what we've talked about already touches on this, but that idea of passion, I think, is maybe something that we haven't delved into completely. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so, your passion is what you love to do, and your mission is what you'd like to change, what you'd like to see changing in the world. What makes you angry is often your mission, and what makes you excited is often your passion. And it's when you bring those two together, as I said, that you get your purpose. So your creative passion is a tremendous source. Both are. Your mission is as well. So mission operates almost like bedrock. And it gives you the longevity and the resilience to keep going when things don't go well. Passion is more immediate and can be cultivated. When you remind yourself that what you love about this work, then suddenly things that are impossible become very possible. When you are feeling that level of, and when you see it with authors when they meet other authors who are in the same genre or do things in similar ways, whatever, the energy just it just rises up, and these in that moment they can do anything. So in tapping into the passion, understanding it, and then coming back to it when things get difficult, which they will. They're, writing and publishing are two high level skills, and they will be difficult. And growing, personal development for a writer and a publisher is professional development and personal development. They're the same thing. And so there's going to be growing pains. I mean, you're going to feel it. And when those things come on board, being able to remind yourself of your creative passion, what it is, why you are, and also of your mission, why you're here, what you want to achieve, what you want to change, what you want to see, have the kind of impact you want to have, the influence you want to have on your readers, and so on. Being able to tap back into those, knowing what they are, is the first point, and then returning to them and constantly cultivating them in the proper way. It gives you all this energy. What generally is happening instead with a lot of people is a lot of negative feelings about what they're doing. So not seeing it as a growth thing and forgetting passion and forgetting the mission and just getting bogged down in the work. And I think that's, that's where our creative capacity is then shrinks. So into fear, there's a lot of leaching of creative energy when we get into a worry cycle or a fear cycle or a anger cycle or a jealousy cycle or, all of these things, they just drain creative energy away. And passion and mission are the antidote to those.
Mission is certainly something I can imagine somebody crafting and writing down as a reference point. When you're thinking about passion, is that something that is more like a barometer that people should be keeping an eye on? Or do you see a benefit to people actually assessing through writing what their passions are?
Yeah. So the accessing passion is done in a certain way by answering certain questions about what you love and tapping back into your past. So very often we become disconnected from our creative joy, even though we're doing what is our creative joy, we can still become disconnected from it. And so if your passion is live and well and functioning for you, you'll know it, you'll feel it. You'll be saying, it doesn't matter what comes up. I'm enjoying this. So, I'm not going to burn out because I'm happy. But if you're not happy, then it's a sign that you've disconnected with the passion in some way. And then there is a way back to pick it up again. And there's a process that you have to go through that time doesn't permit me to bring us through it. But it is very much about identifying when you last felt happy about it and what in that time, and also tapping back into earlier years when you knew you wanted to be a writer and what was going on at that time and what you thought being a writer would do for what you thought the outcome would be. So passion is very much about how you will become self-fulfilled and self-actualized, whereas mission is more about what you want to change in the world.
Just a quick break from the interview. Are you getting value from the podcast? Please consider supporting it and all the work I do at the Indy Author by becoming a patron. To pledge a monthly contribution, go to patreon.com/the Indy Author, or to make an occasional contribution, perhaps to indicate the value that a specific episode or resource provided to you on your creative voyage, scroll to the bottom of any page at theindyauthor.com and click Buy Me a Coffee. And now, back to the interview. I'm going to move on to the third characteristic of holistic planning, which is recognizing that self-publishing authors must wear three very different hats: maker, manager, and marketeer. And I have to say that, loving the nautical metaphor, I made a play on this in my own private group, which was the voyager, I'm voyaging, filling the sails, SAIL or SIALE, or swabbing the decks. I use swabbing the decks as the manager. But talk a little bit about
I
why you
love
think
this.
it's, yes,
Fabulous. Sales and sales. Excellent. Got
yeah.
it.
So talk a little bit about why you think it's so important to separate those out and to understand what you're doing in each of those areas.
Yeah, it's that again back to creative energy. So and it's also about realizing that publishing is creative as well. So very often we split in our minds and we say writing is the creative bit and publishing and marketing is we think of it as admin, and that's not true. So when we separate out into maker, manager, and marketeer, we begin to see how those different things are happening in different places. So making, for example, doesn't just happen when you're working on your book. You have to make blog posts if you blog. You have to make social media updates if you have to make email newsletters to your readers and so on and so forth. You have to, if you are that way inclined, you will be making maybe some of your illustrations for your marketing and so on. They're all making tasks. You make a podcast, the actual decide what's going to be in the content and the making of it. Then there is the managing part, which happens in writing as much as it happens in publishing, but we think it doesn't, but it does. So you have to be organizing and, if you're a complete pantser, you still have to do some outlining. That's a kind of a management task, but much more than that, the processes which allow the writing to happen, time and energy and the space even in which you sit down to write and what that looks like and, all of those kinds of things. fall under the manager's remit. And the manager's job essentially is to make sure that the maker and the marketeer have what they need to do their jobs and enjoy them in a sustainable way. And so when we begin to think about the manager like that as the person who heads up pace and processes of the whole endeavor, then it begins to feel different than if we just see it as pure admin. It's much more than admin. It's in the managerial tasks and how we manage them that we become the creative director, not just of our writing, but of our publishing as well, and of how they integrate together. And then the marketeer, I call it marketeer, not just marketer, because it's not just about marketing the books, it's about selling them. It's about actually making sales. And so it's both marketing and promotion and how we speak, what promise we make to the reader, how we get across to them what books are about, how we convey all that stuff that we were talking about earlier, the values and the passion and the mission, how that gets transmitted is all falls into the marketeer's role. And the other thing that manager is very key is money. And this is another place where people, the holistic thing falls apart. When it comes to money, the whole mindset changes and go from being growth people and creative people and expansive people to being tight, scared, and, pulling in and afraid to spend a penny kind of thing is a very common dynamic. Or we've set up, writers, artists don't like money by definition. If you, the more you want to make a living, then the less of an artist you are, all those kinds of things. We talk about these things all the time. But when it comes to ourselves and recognizing our own dynamics and our own relationship with money and everything, the planning system is very much about putting yourself first, making sure you get paid as well as everybody else, and making sure that you allocate your money so that you realize the money that comes in it has to be divided up into tax. People will be taking some of it and the money that needs to go to your editor and everybody else. But to make sure that you get paid in it as well, it's really important. So that's what I mean about the kind of the holistic aspect of it. Everything hinges on everything else.
I like that idea of not categorizing a set of tasks like email, let's say. I think that was a great example as one of those. And I'm extrapolating that not only should you be considering this from a planning point of view, but if you go into an activity like now I'm going to write my monthly email newsletter, that there's the maker part where you're crafting the letter. There's the manager part that understands what you hope to get out of the email and what you want your readers to get out of the email. And then the marketeer is considering how what you're doing with the email factors into the rest of your business. Like, is this going to be a sales focused email or a community building email or whatever? And I like that. That feels much more comfortable than kind of going, now I have to write my email because it seems to somebody like a marketeer thing or a manager thing, and maybe they don't like those things. But if you look at each task as having components of all of them, is that a legitimate interpretation of what you're saying?
That's like so well put. It's exactly right. And the email, I think the email is a great example because so many authors, and myself included for a very long time, the email is really hard. And why is it so hard? And we all wonder about that. And I think the reason why it's so hard is certainly the point of discovery for me about why it was so hard for me was because I was leaving Maker out. I
Yeah.
did see it as a manager task and a marketeer task, and I didn't cross them. And as soon as I began to think how it connects to the passion and mission, but also, in the same way to the books, and realizing you need to approach this email in a way that it isn't just about getting it done. I'm getting back to my creative work.
Yeah.
This is my creative work. And,
Yeah.
what is more creative than the actual reaching out to the reader directly? And I mean, this is what writers dreamed about back in the days when you were third party published, that you actually got to connect with your reader. But how quickly things become chores when we approach them with certain ways of thinking. So, yeah, that's exactly right. There is a creative dimension to absolutely everything, actually, if you can find it. And the second you find it, far more energy, and also something else comes in, something that isn't your conscious mind, something that's coming from the unconscious that is far more perfect than anything you would consciously craft. And certainly anything you'd consciously craft when you're just trying to get the job over so you can go back to doing the thing that you think you want to do more than anything else.
Yeah. I think that's a really nice entree to the next characteristic of holistic planning, which is it incorporates creative rest and play into your weekly plans as well as creative work. And, as you were describing a different approach to crafting an email, you could see how that could become creative play. But I think you're talking here about something separate from the creative work when you're talking about creative rest and play. And this is something that not only I'm going to be very interested in hearing, but my husband's going to be interested in hearing this and then recording it and playing it back for me periodically because I'm a work smarter and harder kind of person. So, talk about creative rest and play a little bit.
Yeah. So, you know, I'm such a believer in both of these. And, you talked about how email could be playful. It won't be unless you know how to cultivate create play more widely. And then it comes in. And this is the thing that you do. So something kind of counterintuitive happens. People, when you see play or rest as breaks from the process, whatever it is you're trying to make happen, that's wrong thinking. Actually, creative rest and creative play, when indulged in a certain way, are process. So work, rest, and play become completely integrated. So it's very counterintuitive and it's hard to do. Like you say, most of us are indie authors. We're not afraid of work. If you're afraid of work, you don't come into this room, do you? It's just, you just don't. So some of us are workaholics. We need we need that compulsive kind of hit that we get from work and achievement and success, however we define it. And that's all good. There's nothing wrong. Hard work never killed anyone, as my mother said. But actually, it has killed some people, but not probably not writers. But it can kill your joy, and that's what we're coming back to again. Kind of where we started at the beginning. Creative play and creative rest. It feels counterintuitive to stop and to go off and do these things. And when I talk about creative rest and play, yes, I'm talking about very specific things. So creative rest is anything that stills the mind. So it might be meditation, it might be sleep, it might be, different people have different sorts of technique. And there is both short and longer versions of these built into the planning program. So the program encourages a retreat once a year. And that means a retreat, not I'm going away to write retreat, but an actual retreat from everything and downtime. And some writers and some indie authors find that extraordinarily difficult. And then on the other side, play is again anything you absolutely love to do and is often for authors is physical because get away from the desk and we need to, dance or run or climb. In your case, high dive, and in somebody else's case, climb the rock wall and those kinds of up activities. So holiday vacations where you are doing, whatever you think is your idea of fun would be creative play, whereas, crash out on the beach and just read easy novels, that's more like creative rest. It's different for everybody. What we like to do and how we like to do it is very different. And again, there's a process in finding out what is right for you and also in seeing, am I resting when I think I'm resting? Or am I just doing more stuff in a different way? And am I playing when I think I'm off? Or am I just thinking, have I just brought work home and I'm just thinking about the next thing I have to do and so on? There's a whole process of self recognition in there. And then there is a kind of dissolving of habits. And when this balance comes in, when work is feeding play, is feeding rest, is feeding work, is feeding play, and you've got that benign circle, that holistic, to use the word that you've been using for this entire episode. When that comes in, now we're really feeling creative energy. Now we're really able to do things that, you don't even know yourself how you did. They just happened and you still feel energized. You're not tired. You feel great. And it's all because you took a little bit of time for creative rest and you took a little bit of time for creative play. And now your creative work, it just blossoms and again, it's because this thing comes in and it's bigger than us, bigger than our conscious minds. So when we're relying too much on the conscious mind, we're shrinking ourselves. We are larger than that. We've got much more there to draw on, but we're cutting it off when we don't allow ourselves creative rest and creative play.
I like that you're dividing that into 2 things because I think people have gotten so used to thinking of work-life balance, and there are only 2 categories, there's work or there's life, and I like the idea of separating out the rest and the play and how you're defining them.
Yeah, when people talk about work-life balance as well, they're often talking about family and other
Yes.
people, or life in other sorts of ways. But these are very specific things to do. And they're not things to do in the sense of another thing to tick off your box. That isn't how it is. And if it is like that, there's something not right there in that dynamic. But they are very specific in the sense that you can be off in inverted commas and not off at all. You can be draining yourself and giving yourself, not giving yourself what you need for your work or indeed for yourself or for your life. So there are huge life benefits in this as well, but they are done yourself. So you're create one of the practices that's recommended is I call it create date. And those of you who have done the artist's way, Julia Cameron's artist's way, will recognize the artist state. It's very similar. And I just find artist state very heavy. The whole idea of having to be an artist is kind of intimidating. So just to create with yourself, short, once a week, doing something away from everybody else. It's so nurturing. It's just incredibly nurturing. And then also the creative rest practices, when they're done in a certain way, they just nurture you so much and everything just becomes, yeah, there's that loveliness comes back in again.
The a way I'm seeing this play out or not play out in my own life is that I really have to consciously remind myself if I get up after, 8 hours of whatever I've been doing and take a dog for a walk, then sometimes I consciously remember to remind myself not to listen to a podcast because my go-to activity is go out with the dogs. And now here's my opportunity to be catching up on the latest in the Indian self-publishing world. And sometimes I have to say to myself, no, let's just not do anything like that for a little while. Let's just walk the dog. Let's just look around and see what's going on in the world. It's hard to remember
It,
to do sometimes.
it is 100%. And, the more we love what we do, back to the passion again, the more we love what we do, the harder that can be, because we love every bit of it. So we want to keep going. But there definitely comes a point where you're just, ugh, you're just making yourself feel drained. It doesn't work. And being in the moment, as you're talking about with the dog, in whatever is around you and feeling and experiencing your life. Because when you're writing, you're taking yourself out of your own life in a way. Even and obvious that's very obvious in fiction writing, where you're literally taking yourself out of your own life and into another character's life. But it's true in every aspect of writing. You have to be in your head, right? It's a mental cognitive experience, and therefore you're out of your senses, really. You're not aware of what you are in that moment feeling unless something comes in. Oh, I realize I'm hungry or I'm cold or something like that. But generally speaking, you're not in the moment. You're in your head. And so the redressing balance of getting back into where your senses are activated and you're smelling and seeing and tasting and touching and feeling and, all of that, it's really important. The other thing that happens if we don't fill the well with new activities and feelings and sense impressions, and it's we dry up. We don't have a lot to say because we haven't, we haven't filled the well. So the well is dry and we've nothing to give.
Yeah. So I'm going to move on now to the final characteristic that you called out about a holistic planning effort, which is it encourages a growth mindset and a pay yourself first policy. You mentioned this a little bit about the importance of being compensated for one's creative work, but talk about that growth mindset and pay yourself first policy.
Yeah, so those two are really important. So I think I've kind of touched off them, but essentially the growth mindset is that, growth is possible. And how do I grow here? Because if we are writing, we want to grow as people so that we are worthy of being read. And if we are publishing, we want to grow as a publisher and reach more readers and have more influence and have more impact in the world. So it is about growth. Creativity is expansive. Growth is what we're after. We're here. We want to be there. There's gap in between, and growth is what takes us there. And I think I mentioned earlier, the personal growth, professional growth, the profit growth, they're all very closely intertwined in all the creative industries, writing and publishing included. So it isn't about, I don't like this, I can't do that. That is not a growth mindset. That is a limiting mindset. So it's at the simplest level, it's about understanding that growth is what you're actually engaged in. And whenever you hear yourself going contrary to that, and instead of being expansive, being contractive, instead of being proactive, being reactive, these are all signs that we are not now in the place of growth. So that's one aspect of it. And then the pay yourself first, that's at every level. As writers, we are offering a gift. We're mining our gift to give it out. Yes, we get paid back and so on. But that is essentially the dynamic. And so we can give ourselves away, and we do. And you can see that not just writers, but creatives in general are taken advantage of everywhere, all over the place. Why? Because we allow it. We allow it as individuals, and we allow it as a group. And I mean, I really, really want to change that. And I don't know if we can, but I feel that we can, and I think that we should. And I think what's happening here in our time is that the creative industries are catching up with the other industries in terms of realizing, the kinds of things we're talking about doing and the kinds of ways in which we are now approaching publishing and realizing how we reach readers and how we make sales, all of these things. We're kind of catching up with other industries and thinking about how these things operate for us in our industry, because it's not the same, but lots of it is the same. Well, at core, what we have to do is value ourselves. So it's back to where we started with the values. Valuing, the reader, and the reader valuing us is contingent on us valuing ourselves and understanding, so that we don't see so many writers ending up either in severe addiction or, making money for a year or two and then in poverty for the rest of their lives. All these kinds of things that we have built up around our industries are signs of things that, so I also think that we turn to writing or any creative activity to heal and to grow. And so allowing that healing and that growing to happen means putting it first and recognizing what you as an individual need in order for you to heal and grow. That is the holistic, positive, expansive, growth, creative way. But allowing your gift to reach you so that you are giving everything away and you end up with nothing and everybody else gets paid. Money is a good indicator here. Everybody else gets paid, but you don't get paid. That is a sign that something else is going on. That's not expansive. That's not growth. That's not creativity. And so digging in there a bit and finding out what's going on. You could spend 10 years or you could spend your whole life and never get there. Or you could do some planning, exploration, and move mountains in days and just change and grow enormously. And because the whole creative flow comes in behind your efforts to understand and to draw things together and to go there, to go there for yourself. Put yourself first, pay yourself first.
So I wanted to wrap up with a question about timeframes, because I realized that as we were talking, I was seeing a way, like I think of planning as being a strategic, maybe quarterly sort of effort. As we were talking, I was seeing lots of ways of applying these to the assessment of even down to individual tasks. We were talking about the email, and I'm realizing that over the last couple of weeks on my tickler list of tasks, each week I have a check my plan. I have a quarterly plan, and each week I have a reminder to myself to just check in with it, make sure it's still making sense. And I realized that for the last several weeks, I haven't done that because I just wanted to get to the next thing on my list, which is kind of embarrassing. But can you talk a little bit about, is it true that people can apply what we've been talking about at a granular level as well as a strategic level? But if they're focused on the strategic level, do you have recommendations for how often this assessment should be taking place?
Yeah, so it begins with the work. The workbook goes through the things that we've been talking about here today to now. But then you do go into a quarterly plan. And there is a quarterly planner and there is a monthly planner. And that quarterly planner breaks down into the months. And then the monthly planner breaks down into weeks and into days. So you take it right into the task that you are in today. And the revisiting happens at least weekly. So there is a group. It's not just a workbook and planners. There is actually a group that meets. And when I say meet, it's an online thing. We're in a Facebook group, but it's now all happening through Patreon. So on Mondays, we map our intentions for the week and write down, under maker hat, under manager hat, under marketeer hat, what we intend to do. And then on Friday, we come back and we log our accomplishments, what we actually did do. And some weeks you did what you set out to do, and some weeks you did better, and some weeks you don't get going at all. And, or maker did well, and marketeer fell off a cliff or whatever. It doesn't matter. It's the logging of it, and the logging of it together in the accountability group is very powerful. That really helps people to see. And what I notice over the years is that people come in and they're going to do mountains. Every Monday is a mountain. Maker has a mountain, marketeer is a mountain, and it doesn't have a beginning and an end. It's just, it's just huge. But as the time goes on, the intentions shrink until they are actually week-sized intentions instead of being year-sized or quarter-sized intentions in a week. And that connection with how my own creative process unfolds across time in a week and across a month and then across a quarter. I find the quarter, a lot of what's in the planning system, as well as drawing heavily on the creative psychology stuff, it also draws on business stuff. The quarter is a quarter for a reason. It works. It really is very effective. You can manage 12 weeks in your mind. You can shift big things in 12 weeks. It's a really good time frame, and you could break it into 3, which is really great. Months 1, months 2, months 3, and if you haven't caught up and you can catch up with yourself, and all of those things go on a quarter. Quarter is a very manageable piece of time. And so anything that I tried from any management system that I met, I kept. Anything that worked for me as a creative, I kept. Just let go a lot of the big stick stuff and the hit yourself over the head stuff and the squeeze yourself into a box stuff. So time is very much part of this, and coming back to the plans. Because one of the things the plan does, what makes it a planning system and not just calendar, is the actual understanding of your top priority, your top task for that quarter, for that month, for that week, for that day. And so returning to the plan, you can start off the morning knowing this is my top intention. And by 11 o'clock, you can be so fragmented, you've forgotten what you even wanted to do that day. The plan is there. So you can just return to that. You can take refuge in the plan. It's there. It kind of holds you up and at the different time levels. And that gives you the space then to breathe and to bring in the 3 dimensions into the different tasks.
I can imagine calling this episode Creating a Refuge, Creative Planning for Authors and Poets. I really like that.
Okay.
Because I think it's not what people think of when they think of a plan. They think of a plan as what? Almost a restriction in some ways.
I think so. I
yeah.
think so, because so many plans they are that. They're trying to make a machine of you.
Yeah.
And that's the other thing about these, because they're creative plans. They can be messy, and you change as you need to, you scratch out, you use them in your own way. So all of that is very much part of, built in again. It's not something that you've done wrong and you have to tear it up and start again. It's actually built in. We have to allow that to happen because the creative process is idiosyncratic. We're not machines, and we never will be. And as the machine become more and more prevalent in the creative field now, I think tapping into our humanity is ever more important. And hopefully they help people to do that.
That's not great. Well, Orna, it is always interesting and inspirational to speak with you. And I know that people are going to be interested in the Kickstarter now. So please share a little bit of information about where they can find out more about that.
Yes. So the link to go to is selfpublishingadvice.org/planners24. Selfpublishingadvice.org /planners24. And the Kickstarter starts on the 5th of November, and it runs for about 15 days, and it will Spiral bounds are coming, people. If any of you are the people who have been asking for the spiral bounds, that's part of what the Kickstarter is about, to actually make those. But there are lots of different things, and also accountability, and there's a sort of a give it a try pack and various different things in the Kickstarter. So hopefully there's something there for everyone at different levels of both engagement and investment.
It's going to be also interesting timing because I'm going to be going for the first time to 20 Books Vegas. And my planner would be available when I got back from that, loaded up with all sorts of ideas and having a way to sort through that and saying, yes, it would be fun to do 27 things in the next month, but let's take a step back. Um,
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's a filter. You can
yeah,
filter all that in and know that it will happen, and it's there, but it's not going to happen. It's not all going to happen now because you can only do
yeah.
one thing at a time. Yes. Fantastic.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Orna.
Thank you so much, Matty, for the opportunity. And yeah, I'll be writing and publishing to you too.
Happy writing and publishing.